BeTheTalk, episode 163, featuring Tony Loyd. Welcome to BeTheTalk. We go behind the talk 7 days a week for tips and techniques to help you change the world. I'm Nathan Eckel, and a talker myself, I'm interviewing others who change the world with their talk. You can too, even if you've never given a talk before. Let's get started with today's show. We are live with Tony Loyd. Tony, are you ready to talk?
Always ready to talk.
Tony Loyd is a radio host, keynote speaker, and best-selling author of Crazy Good Advice, 10 Lessons Learned from 150 Leading Social Entrepreneurs. Tony is a former Fortune 500 executive with extensive experience in strategic planning, talent management, and leadership development. Tony Loyd, welcome to the talk.
Thanks so much for having me, Nathan. I'm glad to be here.
So you just recently gave a talk entitled Before You Begin, Career Advice for a Meaningful Life. I love how you mentioned the opportunity to pivot and to really be agile, and so many people need to hear this. It was over at TEDxDrakeU University. Please take us behind that talk.
Yeah. So, when you're putting together a talk, and Nathan, you're a pro, you know how this goes. It's not about me, right? So it's not really about me and my message and who I am and how fancy I am. Nobody cares, right? So it's about them. And so when you think about what does a student need to talk about? So they talk about what they're going to do to be the best student they can be while they're in university. So that's things like time management, task management, productivity, leadership, all those kinds of things. But then the other thing they want to know about is what happens after you leave university. I mean, what's the whole point of all this education, right? So we want to be able to spend a little bit of money. And in order to do that, we have to be able to earn a little bit of money and maybe save a little bit of money and invest a little money. But it's not just about the money, right? So it's also about having a meaningful life. And so when you think about what does a college student want to know, they want to know, how do I navigate this thing called a meaningful life while making a living? And we all want to know that, right? And so as I was preparing the talk, that's the audience and that's the topic and that's what I was focused on. So the other thing I'll say is somebody just did a time study, and they found that the average working American during a work week, during the workday, they will sleep 36% of their time, and they will be at work or work-related activities 37% of their time. So in other words, 2/3 of your life, you're either asleep or you're at work. So if you want to have a meaningful life, you have to figure out how to make that part of your life meaningful. And so that's what we talked about. We talked about how do you find meaning within any work that you do, or how do you find work that is meaningful? And, Nathan, if your high school counselor would have said to you, hey, someday you're going to have your own show and it's going to be on the internet and you are going to have, a YouTube channel and you're going to be interviewing people about their talk, you would have thought, what is this guy smoking? What is wrong with this person? And so there's no way that I could say for them, well, first you do this, then you do that, and it all leads to a meaningful career. And so what I did was I told a couple of stories. One was based on my life, and one was based on a guest, somebody I had interviewed on a podcast. And so I told these stories, and one of the big questions that often gets asked is career success, is that because of hard work or is that because of luck? And so that's been a really interesting question. And so last year, as you mentioned, I wrote a book. It's a bestseller. It's called Crazy Good Advice, 10 Lessons Learned from 150 Leading Social Entrepreneurs. And if I took the entire book and all the advice that I was given and everything I'd learned from those first 150 interviews, I can boil it down to this one sentence. And that sentence is, miracles find you while you're in motion.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. And so it's not about I'm going to go create a miracle, or, I'm going to work really hard and all, it's about get out, get working, start doing. And somewhere in there, these little moments of serendipity are going to find you. It's almost like we are surrounded by these moments of serendipity, these synchronicity, and we don't bump into them unless we're in forward motion.
Oh, I love it. And I love the kind of the flawedness of that question. Hard work over here, and hard work worked maybe for previous generations where everything was cut and dry and prescribed. Yep. Or what was the other? Luck. And luck never works. Come on. Hard work, which is kind of, it's not that you don't have to work hard. You just have to work in an agile way, and you have to do something and keep pivoting until something sticks.
Yeah.
So I love that middle ground.
It goes back to that Arthur Ashe quote where he says, start where you are, do what you can, use what you have and do what you can. And that was really like, how does this work? Right? We know that miracles find us while we're in motion, but how does that work? And so it's start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. So that was basically the whole presentation right there.
Sure. And you've got other talks up there. I'll put those in the show notes, especially if Tony reminds me right there. Tell us a little bit more about what was behind this project of Crazy Good Advice. Obviously to kind of, debunk some of those myths, but I love talking with other radio hosts who are interviewing a whole bunch of other people. We're getting ready to hit, I think your episode will probably be a little past the 150 mark. When it airs. So what was your big takeaway once you got to 150?
Yeah. So I'm continuing to learn. I figure after about 7 years, I might have a little idea about what I'm doing, right? So, but actually the book came out of necessity. So I was a podcaster. Miracles finding you while you're in motion. I met somebody who worked at a radio station. They invited me to start a radio program. I knew nothing about how to start a radio program. I'm a podcaster, man. You just turn on a mic and you record and you upload it, right? And so I knew nothing about that. So I knew I needed to get a little bit of production help and some extra help in. So because I didn't know how to do a radio program, I needed this help, and therefore I reached out to somebody to talk about how do I do a crowdfunding campaign. And so I had recently interviewed somebody about a crowdfunding campaign, and so I reached back out to him. His name's Tom Dawkins, and he runs Start Some Good, really great guy out of Australia. And I asked him, so how do you do that? How do you do a crowdfunding campaign? And he said, it's all about, so your friends are going to support you because they're your friends, but their friends are going to support you for the rewards. And so he said, you really need something that is personal. It can only come from you and blah, blah, blah. And so we brainstormed a bunch of ideas. And finally he goes, I said, I have this blog post I'm trying to write, and it's sort of like gotten out of hand. And it's like the 10 lessons I learned from the first 150 interviews with leading social entrepreneurs. And he's like, yeah, that, you need to write that book. So I'm like, okay, so I've got to launch a radio program. To do that, and I don't know how to do that. To do that, I have to run a crowdfunding campaign, which I've never done before. And to do that, I have to write a book. Yeah. Right.
Did you actually do that, or was that a little too much scope creep for you there, Tony?
No, that's what we did.
You did it.
What I was able to do, Nathan, and I bet you could do this right now, is to take all, first 150 interviews. Mm-hmm. And then in every interview, I asked people for their best advice. And I categorized. I put keywords in a spreadsheet, and I sorted it all out. And when I finished sorting it, it turns out that there were just 10 things that were said again and again and again. And I said, that's it. So we, my wife illustrated and laid out the book. She's a graphic artist.
Oh, nice.
And I could tell you 10,000 lucky breaks, coincidences, things that led to this book coming to fruition. But we launched the crowdfunding campaign. We wrote the book. We put out the book. And then after the crowdfunding campaign, we put the book up on Amazon, and it became a bestseller. So it's like, I'm like the Forrest Gump of business. I just keep stumbling forward.
Well, run, Forrest, run. Miracles hit you when you're you're in motion, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's how it was for Forrest too.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Well, we've been enjoying this talk with Tony Loyd. He is a radio show host. He is the talker of the recent talk, Before You Begin, Career Advice for a Meaningful Life. And we will be right back with Tony Loyd for the Blitz Round. People ask, how could I start a 7-day-a-week podcast? It's because of what I've learned from my mentors. Some of the best mentors in history aren't around anymore. They've left hours of one-on-one mentoring behind in their books. Each month at Classics on Tap, I record a new chapter from a classic business book to help you make a difference. Download your first chapter at classicsontap.com. And we're back with Tony Loyd. It is time for the Blitz Round, when I ask Tony a series of either-or questions related to the preparation and the actual performance of his recent branded talk. Tony, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Question number 1. Were you selected to speak, Tony, or did you apply?
I applied, but it was odd circumstances. I had done another TEDx talk at Duke University. I came home, and I happened to notice that Drake University, not far from me, was doing a TEDx event. I messaged them on Facebook to say, hey, I assume you've already got all your speakers. And they messaged me back and said, oh, by the way, we had somebody who dropped out, and could you drive down, and could you do this for us? And so I did. And so with like about 3 weeks prep, I developed a new talk and then went down there and did it for Drake University.
Love it. Now, what was that experience like, turning around? You said 3 weeks?
Yes.
So you did two TEDx talks in 3 weeks.
Yeah, so that was a little bit crazy. I'm the kind of person who puts 10 pounds of potatoes in a 5-pound sack every time, right? So, but what I did was, I have a friend, Sally Coring-Zimney, and she is a speech coach, talk coach. And so I reached out to her, and she just helped me shape it. And we worked you're doing your blitz questions. She worked in a blitz with me, and we just put together this talk in just a few weeks, and away we went.
Are you a memorizer, an improviser, or a blender?
A little of both. Yeah, I am the blender. So what I know about myself, I tend to talk on or ad-lib little things in the middle. So I prepare a memorized about a 12-minute talk, and then I know that will be at least 15 minutes, and then that gives me a kind of casual stroll through the talk to make it to 18 minutes. So, I'm a little bit of both. I used to lean a little too heavily on the improv skills. I did improv. I traveled for 6 months with an improv troupe and all that. And I used to lean a little too heavily on that. Now I tend to say, take this seriously, give it your best, memorize a great talk, and then just let the room fill up with the things that are needed in the moment.
Are you, frankly, with the performance, Tony, did you have nerves, or were you in the zone, or neither, or both?
Both. So, fear is my body's way of telling me to get ready for peak performance, right? So I knew that this was important. I took the gravitas of the moment very seriously. But at the same time, the more nervous I am, the more I realize I'm making this about me, and this isn't about me. So the more I focus on the people in the room and the message, and it's sort of like there's this spirit or message that wants to come through, and you just have to kind of like get out of the way and let that happen for the people who are in the room. So focusing on others really helped me to not be afraid.
What's a tip, technique, or a tool that helped you, Tony?
I'd say what I found when I first started to do the talk was I had 1 point and 3 illustrations of the same point. And by the time I got finished about 3 weeks later of prep, I had 3 major points I was trying to make. So, just simply realizing that, so a simple outline, an introduction, 3 points, and a closing, and that's it. And so by making that pivot, in my preparation, going from 1 point with 3 different illustrations, which isn't helpful, to 3 different points, it really helped a lot.
Cool. This is the painful one. This is the cut for time question. What was the most painful part of your talk that you had to cut out?
Yeah, I had narrowed it down to just a little bit of introduction about myself and my story, which was painful for me to do anyway. I don't like talking about myself. I'm like the least interesting person in the room. But I had two other people that I was telling their stories, and I had reached out to them and said, "Hey, I want to include you in this TEDx talk, and I want to make sure I'm telling your story and make sure I'm telling it right." And they had filled in the blanks for me and really helped me to get ready. And then we just knew I had too much material. And so my speech coach said, "Look, you've got to lose one of those two stories. You've got to keep your own personal story in there." And so I had to take one of them out. And that just hurt. It was like ripping my heart out.
What advice do you have in helping other people kill their darlings?
Yeah. Oh, man. Well, it's not about you. Right. So, if you just keep in mind, this isn't about you. This isn't about your talk. This is about your audience. This is about the people who are present. Then it gives you more permission to kill your darlings.
This is a performance. So what was the most unexpected, strange, or just plain weird thing that happened during or right before your talk, Tony?
Well, I'd say that, if you look at the video of it, it looks a little bit like maybe your uncle filmed it in the garage. It was a student in the back of the room. God bless her. She did the best job she could with the equipment she had. She filmed it on an iPhone, and she's standing a long ways away from me. And it looks and sounds like that. And if you look at the video, the other thing is there's like a tree swaying in the window in the background. It looks like people are waving their hands.
Was there a tornado watch during your talk? What was going on? There
was a big storm coming, which you should have told me something. It was Friday the 13th. But what it tells me though is it's about excellence and not perfection. Right. Mm-hmm. So it is there. It is available for people to see. The videos that are coming out of TEDxDuke, they're beautiful. They're multi-camera, well lit, good sound, all that. The things that are coming out of Drake University, it was a small team. They had a tiny little budget and they pulled this thing off. So yes, it's not about perfection. It's about excellence.
Yeah, well, Talk Universe, I think this is really key what Tony's bringing up right here, because as a speaker, as a branded speaker, whether it's TEDx or somewhere else, we always have to be, especially if we've never been a branded speaker before, we just need to have one attitude, and that's a gratitude attitude, just like Tony is mentioning. There may be things that they're absolutely top notch. That's wonderful. There may be things where it's a newer team or some changes or turnover. And our job is to go up there and bring it and do the best that we possibly can. So I just love that though. I remember Tony's talk. The first thing when you see it, it's this beautiful window behind him, and this tree is just doing like yoga behind Tony right there. I thought it was absolutely hilarious. Now, any reframing in the moment before you went up to speak, with all of that going on? What did you do to kind of center yourself? You knew it wasn't going to necessarily be optimal. So how did you still reframe your expectations so that you could serve and give?
Yeah. So again, I think I'm repeating myself a little too much, but it's not about me, right? So just by focusing on the people in the room, and as I'm speaking, I'm making eye contact, I'm moving around the room, I'm looking at people, I'm seeing, are they engaged, are they not? What can I do to really, sort of support them? There's like, the talk is the content, but the most important thing is the context. It's that big bowl that all the content goes into. So holding that space for the room and really sort of just loving up that group that's in there, that's I think the job of every great speaker.
We've been enjoying this talk with Tony Loyd. His website is TonyLoyd.com. His last name is Loyd. There's only one L. Only one L. And TonyLoyd.com, his talk over at Drake University, TEDxDrakeU University, Before You Begin, Career Advice for a Meaningful Life. You can check those out on our show notes page at BeTheTalk.com, or you can type that into YouTube. Tony, your other TEDx talks, I will put on the show notes page when he gets them to me, because he has multiples as well. And we will be right back with Tony Loyd for the final word of advice in just a moment. Everyone wants to change the world, but not everyone knows the first step. Before you can change the world with your talk, it has to be selected. So grab the templates, timelines, and tools that I use to get my talk selected at BeTheTalk.com. And we're back with Tony Loyd and the final word of advice for Talk Universe.
Yeah, I just say start. As I interviewed people for my podcast and radio program, the number one most frequently given piece of advice is just start. And you're not going to be perfect the first time out. I mean, you're not going to be perfect 7 years from now. So just start.
Tony Loyd, thanks so much for coming on the talk today and sharing your wisdom with Talk Universe.
Thanks, Nathan.
Thanks for listening to Be the Talk. For tips and resources to help you change the world, go to BeTheTalk.com. See you tomorrow.